constitutional amendments at ang proseso po sa ngayon ay pareho sa legislation since the Constitution itself is silent and it applies at the same time also to the Senate. So maybe the Secretariat can pull out the House internal rules on constitutional amendments to help the members understand better kung paano po ang ating magiging proseso. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kong Doy, with your indulgence, there are slated order of preference.
Yeah.
But
only for the not to interpolate, but to address only the issue at hand right
with
now.
your
Regards
indulgence, you may
to
proceed very brief. Deputy Speaker, slated, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to address the issue about, but only for the not Constitution actually provides the most stringent requirement, and that is voting 3/4. Yan na po yung pinakamataas na botohan. So yan yung pagpapahalaga natin sa Constitution natin. That's one way, and provides the most stringent. Pangako ko sa'yo, very brief lang, Mr. Chair. Mamaya na lang. I'll just reserve other questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, Deputy Speaker Doyle Lechon. Next is Representative.
Clarificatory question also, Mr. Chair.
After Kong Lawrence Fortun. This is also coming from the minority. So, Kong Lawrence Fortun, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I also say congratulations to your appointment, election as new chairman of the Constitutional Amendments Committee. Mr. Chair, 2 points lang, no? One on the Constituent Assembly issue. We said, no, that Congress, no, may pursue amendments to the Constitution the way we propose legislations. The only great difference there is that on the final vote, the required vote would be not the simple majority, but 3/4 vote, no, of all members. Not just 3/4 of members present, but 3/4 of all members of both houses, no, voting separately. Now, Vice Chair Defensor said earlier that in case there are differences, no, between the version adopted by the House and the version adopted by the Senate, both houses can proceed to the route of a bicameral conference to settle their differences. Now, my question, Mr. Chair, is that after conflicting provisions are reconciled and the bicameral conference is able to come up with a common version, does that version become now the final version adopted by both houses, o ibabalik pa ba ito ulit sa dalawang houses para pagbutuhan ulit ng another 3/4? Because there might be a possibility, Mr. Chair, that there are members of either house who voted in favor of the proposed amendments base doon sa version na inadopt ng kanilang house. No? For instance, in the case of the House of Representatives. Ngunit nung nag-reconcile na, nag-consolidate ng mga provisions ang bicameral conference, maaring may natanggal, maaring may nadagdag, na wala naman doon sa original na version na inadopt ng House of Representatives, for instance. So, the 3/4 vote earlier would not anymore be reflective of the real sentiment, no, as regards the new version adopted in the bicameral conference. So ang tanong po dito, ibabalik ba ang bagong version, no, na inadopt ng bicameral conference sa both houses para pagbutuhan ulit ng 3/4?
May I answer that, Mr. Chair?
Please proceed, Congressman Defensor.
Congressman Fortun, my position is that if ever there are differences in the versions of the Senate and Congress, and after meeting in a bicameral conference, may bagong version tayong lumabas, it is my position, and I hope it will be the position of this committee and Congress, na dapat pagbotohan pa din at 3/4 vote pa din ang dapat makuha, whether we are voting jointly or separately. These are provisions of the Constitution, at ang pagboto at pag-approval ng 3/4 of all its members ay dapat manatili pa rin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kasi pwede kasing bumoto tayo ng pabor doon sa version natin at sa bagong version hindi tayo pabor. So kailangan ibalik talaga sa both houses at magbotohan ito ng 3/4. Now, Mr. Chair, do we have a clear position now as to the voting? Do we vote separately or jointly? Kasi interchangeably ginagamit natin na whether we vote jointly or separately, basta importante 3/4, no? Because if it's a constituent assembly, Mr. Chair, and we vote jointly, then that would mean 24 plus 300, then 3/4 of the 324, no? However, if we vote separately, that would be 3/4 of the 24 and 3/4 of the 300. So there's a great deal of difference there. So what is our position here? Separately or jointly, Mr. Chair?
The position of the speaker, including that of this committee, and in fact, the one pending before us is RBH 2, which has a plain, unequivocal, and explicit language that we will vote separately, meaning the three-fourths vote of all members of Congress voting separately. Malinaw po yun.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
we cannot see in the provision of the Constitution that we will vote separately. Walang nakalagay doon. Maski bali-baligtarin mo yung Article 12, Section 1, Constitution. Ikaw na rin ang nagsabi kanina na pati nga yung pagbuo ng Constituent Assembly, wala ngang nakalagay dyan eh. Di ba? Much less, voting separately, hindi sinasabi dyan. Kung akong tatanungin mo, mas gusto ko joint. Mas madali yun eh. Bakit ka mo? Eh kung halimbawa, nagawa na natin ang natin gawin dito, tapos na tayo, okay na tayong lahat, bumoto tayo, nakuha natin ang 3/4. Pagdating sa kabila, ang nakuha niya lang 1/4. Edi wala rin tayong nagawa.
Yeah,
Kaya sinasabi ko kanina, maybe you should have sounded off your counterpart in the Senate kung talagang makukuha nila yung 3/4. Kahit na voting separately, papayag ako. Pero sabihin nila sa atin, meron talaga silang 3/4. Kasi kung halimbawa, sabi, boss, anong gawin ko dito? 1/4 lang kami. Eh, ba't pa tayo nagtatangka ng pagbabago dito? Eh, wala rin pala silang madi-deliver doon. Pero kung joint voting, sabi nga ni Congressman Fortun, 24 lang sila, 304 yata tayo. Kunin natin ang 75% ng total na yon, sigurado tayo. So anyway, the Constitution does not categorically say na yung mga tayo, magboboto tayo ng separately. Ba't natin sinasabing separately? Ba't hindi natin tanggapin na joint voting ito?
Well, Deputy Speaker, I fully respect your opinion, but that is a position that is not being shared by this representation, the chairman of this committee, including that of the Speaker, which is the author of the resolution of both houses of Congress, number 2. In fact, we consider the nature of our present Congress today, which is a bicameral Congress. So if we proceed proposing amendment to the Constitution using our constituent power, and treat this as in the process an ordinary bill, except that a more stringent vote is needed, the 3/4 vote of all members of Congress voting separately. So the comparison is, if we treat an ordinary legislation as voting separately in both houses of Congress, how can we have a less stringent requirement on proposing amendment to the Constitution? And that was the very nature of a bicameral Congress right now. Noon kasi nagkaroon tayong hindi bicameral kundi unicameral Congress, and that's why the voting then was joint. But since we have a bicameral Congress, we cannot make less of a stringent voting in voting jointly than what we have now in proposing amendment to the Constitution. But I fully respect your opinion, Deputy Speaker, may tatay, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
No, sinasabi ko lang para magtagumpay tayo. Mas maganda kung joint voting na lang i-advocate natin. Mas mahirap kasi yung separate voting. Tingnan mo if we start as a constituent assembly, I think I read a particular case here, the case of Tolentino versus Comelec. If Congress transforms itself into a constituent assembly, all the members become component elements of a constituent assembly. In other words, forget about being senators, forget about being congressmen. You are all equally considered as component elements of a constituent assembly. We don't talk of a bicameral assembly then. It is a constituent assembly. Kaya ang gagawin na nga, magsasama dapat yun eh. Kaya ang voting, walang sinasabi, voting separately. Kung joint voting yon, 3/4 naman ang kailangan talaga. Very stringent. Nakapag-comply na tayo doon sa stringent requirements in revising a constitution. But in the manner of voting, palagay ko, bonus na natin yon kung joint voting. Kasi mas madali nating makuha yung 3/4 kaysa sa Senado. What is 3/4 in the Senate, Mr. Chair? 18 senators. They will only work for at least 7 senators. Para itong gagawin natin, ma-override nila. What if hindi sila nakakuha ng 3/4? O di, halimbawa, inabot tayo ng 1 buwan dito, Mr. Chair. Napag-debate natin mabuti. Pagkatapos, pagdating doon, 1/4 lang sila. Yung tanong ko, what happens?
As I've said, Deputy Speaker, the circumstance obtaining before then is different from what we have now. We have a bicameral Congress, and an ordinary legislation is being voted upon separately. I think it would be absorbed if a proposed amendment to the Constitution would be treated less stringently. So yan ang aking position, but I respect your position. Let me also acknowledge
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Congressman Defensor.
Thank you, Mr.
But before that, after Congressman Defensor, I will yield to Congressman Fortun.
We are amending, or we are proposing to amend sections of our Constitution. Gusto man nating mapabilis ang ating proseso at magtagumpay, it's not the success of Congress that's important, but it's the respect of the democratic process and the acceptability of the people. Importante pong mahalagang makita ng tao na tama yung proseso. We do not want to reduce or restrict the democratic process by taking the separate power of Senate to vote on their own and vote separately. If we acknowledge that we can proceed separately from the Senate, pag bumoto po tayo at 24 lang sila, matatanggalan po sila ng posisyon whether or not they accept with their 3/4 or reject our proposal to amend the Constitution. We may want to amend the Constitution, pero kung ayaw po ng tao at hindi ang proseso at nasusunod, maapektuhan po ang ating demokrasya, then we have to accept the fact that this process is not the right way of doing and not the right way in amending our Constitution.
Thank you, Cong Defensor. Cong Fortun, your last question, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just would like to emphasize, Mr. Chair, that the rules that we need to adopt and adhere to should be consistent with the stringent requirements for amending the Constitution. We might want the convenient route, but convenience should not prevail over the more stringent requirements, Mr. Chair. Because what the Constitution is trying to ensure here is that talagang may mabusising pagtingin, yung pagtalakay ng amendments at may klarong boto. Kaya tinanong ko kanina, Mr. Chair, yung sa bicameral conference, because if that is not transmitted back to the respective houses for another round of 3/4 voting, it would appear that ultimately the decision to amend the Constitution would reside only in the hands of a few people composing the bicameral conference. Alam naman natin na tinatawag na natin minsan ng bicameral conference na the third